Hello everyone, Matt Soseman here. I'm a senior security architect at Microsoft, and I'm really excited to talk to you about CMMC compliance with Microsoft Endpoint Manager. So let's jump into it. Now, before I get into presentation mode here, there's a couple things I want to mention. There's not enough time in the day. There's so much to this product that I could literally be here all day, maybe even all week. It has that much capability with it. So I built a slide deck here that has some slides around product capability and lots of demos, and then being able to, obviously align that with CMMC. But if you do have questions and you want to go deeper and you want to see additional capability, just let Summit 7 know, and I'm sure they'll be happy to jump on a call with you and work through that with you. The other thing I want to mention here is what I'm going to show you. It might challenge a little bit about some of the traditional approaches in IT. And so my only ask is just have an open mind as you go through this with me, because there's some amazing capability here that can obviously transform how you do IT operations when it comes to endpoint management. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the presentation itself. Now, before we get into Microsoft Endpoint Manager, I do want to talk about how to map Microsoft product and services to CMMC. And this is using the product placemat. And so the product placemat is available at aka.ms/cmmc/product placemat. And this is an Excel spreadsheet that allows you to map the different Microsoft product and services to practices in CMMC. And there you can see some examples from the screenshot. Now, keep in mind, this is only for level 3 right now, so please keep that in your back pocket. And we do want to hear your feedback, so please reference this link later, and you can go out and give us feedback about how this placemat is working for you. Also, I can't talk about CMMC unless I talk about Microsoft 365 Compliance Manager. So this is built into Microsoft 365. It's a web-based solution, as you can see here. It tells me all of the improvement actions that I need to take for CMMC in my tenant. And when I drill into these different improvement actions based on the different products, it will tell me what actions I need to perform. It will even walk me through step by step how to perform those actions. So we take a look at one here like Sender Policy Framework to prevent spoofing. There's the instructions. I can see what standards and regulations this maps back to with a specific control ID. I can upload relative documentation. Really good stuff here. I can even assign it to another user, and that will impact my compliance score as well. And so just a great way to just monitor this and obviously be able to increase my posture and lower my risk. So that's Microsoft 365 Compliance Manager and using it for CMMC. All right, let's talk about Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Now, when I say Microsoft Endpoint Manager, keep in mind that this includes Microsoft Intune and Configuration Manager. It's really in one now. Now, a lot of customers will use this with just Microsoft Intune. They won't necessarily use the Configuration Manager component of it, or they might use both. It kind of depends on what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. But please go ahead and make sure you understand Microsoft Endpoint Manager. And going forward, this is going to be the new way that I talk about Intune is through Microsoft Endpoint Manager. And the best part about this is it's a unified console, right? So if I do have co-management integrated with Microsoft Intune from Configuration Manager, I go to one console to be able to manage this and do policy and all those things. So really, it's a great capability. Okay, so let's get into the Microsoft Intune side of it. Now, this is going to be for CMMC levels 1 through 3 is how it maps out. And this is 100% cloud-based mobile device management and mobile application management solution. And so what I mean by mobile device management is we can manage Windows 10, we can manage Windows 7, Windows 8.1, Mac OS, Android and iOS and iPad OS, and in addition to managing just apps on those devices, like maybe just the Outlook app as an example. Or maybe the Zoom app as well, which we can talk about. But the cool part about Microsoft Intune is it allows me to do zero-touch provisioning for these devices. Literally, IT does not have to touch it, which is a game changer. I can push out all the apps to that device when I provision it. I can then set up controls so that we can divide personal data from corporate data and personal apps from corporate apps. I can be able to do real-time risk analysis when you go to access company data, which we'll get into. This is great because it does enable bring your own device, especially for those organizations who have employees that are just maybe reluctant to enroll their personal devices because they're afraid, Big Brother might be able to view data, which, by the way, Microsoft Intune cannot see personal data. There's literally no place for me to go inside the portal to do that. But hey, users are users, right? And so we want to be able to respect that. And what I love about Microsoft Intune is the mobile application management capability, which says use your personal device. We're not going to manage the operating system at all, but we'll manage the application itself, which is pretty awesome. So we'll get into that here in a little bit. Now, this is 100% cloud-based. It's web-based. And you can see there in the little video that it's all available through endpoint.microsoft.com. Now, I do want to just mention some of the compliance offerings around Microsoft Intune. And you'll probably be concerned with the ones down here at the bottom under US Gov, but also take a note of some of these others in industry, regional, and global, as these might be applicable to you as well. And then also bookmark this website, servicetrust.microsoft.com, where you can learn more about how Microsoft and their compliance offerings work. You can download white papers and documentation and audit reports. It's a great resource. I use it frequently, and frankly, I think everybody should. Okay, CMMC, let's talk about it. Using the product Placemat, and I filter on Microsoft Endpoint Manager, you can see here the CMMC Level 3 mapping to the different practice areas. And green means it's built into Microsoft Endpoint Manager or Azure Active Directory. It's a primary service. And then if it's yellow, it's a secondary service, which means it's part of conditional access, privileged identity management, or just part of Office 365 security and compliance. And then if it's red or clear, it's out of scope. So keep this in mind. But this is how we map Microsoft Endpoint Manager to CMMC. Okay, let's talk about the variations and features between Microsoft Intune and GCC High and the DoD Cloud. Now, I don't want to go through all of these in depth. There are a few I want to point out. I do get asked frequently, Matt, I have Mac devices. Can I use my Jamf Pro subscription to manage Mac devices? You can, but we cannot integrate Jamf Pro with Intune in GCC High and DoD. So just keep, in GCC High. So just keep that in mind. You can manage Mac OS devices with Intune in GCC High, just not with Jamf integrated with Intune. The other one is around mobile threat defense connectors. So Microsoft has these partners that have gone out and built apps that install on Android and iOS that can look for mobile threats. And that obviously integrates with Microsoft Intune. GCC High does not support that. The other thing I want to mention here is Microsoft Intune for GCC High and DoD does not support legacy PC management with the Intune agent. So that means if you're trying to manage Windows 7 or 8.1, that won't be supported through that legacy agent. Management of Windows 10 is supported via the modern MDM channel and the CSP process. The last thing I want to mention is Windows Autopilot. So I am going to talk about Autopilot later. It's not available to GCC High and DoD customers, but planning is underway. But please don't let that set you back, because Autopilot, while it's awesome, there are capabilities that get you Autopilot-like functionality that are just built running Intune. And I'll get to that here coming up in a few moments. Okay. I did want to mention the Gartner Magic Quadrant. And so this is where Microsoft was recognized as a leader in the Unified Endpoint Management Quadrant here for Gartner as of August 2020. And so I just wanted to provide that to you so you can see where Microsoft sits among others out there in the industry. Okay, so now let's get into Microsoft Intune. My favorite capability of this is I don't have to build images. That's pretty awesome. So if I want to provision a device, whether it's a Mac, an iPhone or iPad, an Android device, or even a Windows 10 machine, I could do it with actually zero touch. And now sometimes there's going to be caveats there, and we can get into that, but for the most part, it's going to be zero touch. And what's awesome about that is I can literally get a laptop, like a Windows 10 laptop, off the shelf, order it straight from the OEM, and as it shows up at my doorstep, IT never has to touch it. I turn it on, I connect it to my wireless network. It asks me to log in, and away I go. It automatically pushes down all of my apps, including Win32 apps. It also pushes down all my security policy, and I'm good to go. I don't need an image. This is a game changer. And then same thing for iPad and iPhone and Android devices as well. I can use Android Enterprise and Apple Business Manager to be able to do zero-touch provisioning to those. Now, Windows Autopilot, even though it's not available in GCC High and DoD, it does include some additional functionality, and I'll talk about that here coming up in a second. But for the most part, you can do provisioning of Windows devices without Autopilot. Okay, the other thing I wanted to mention here is around conditional access. And we'll get more in depth in this here coming up. But this is how we can respond to real-time risk analysis before you access company data. And so this might be trying to launch the Outlook app that has sensitive email in it. This might be you logging in and your credentials are up for sale on the dark web. This could be in many different scenarios. And one way that we light that up is through conditional access, which is actually part of Azure Active Directory Premium, which is part of EMS, which is part of Microsoft 365. And Microsoft Intune takes direct advantage over conditional access. And this is geared towards your identity, but it's also geared towards your device. And I'll jump more into that here coming up in just a few moments. Okay, the other thing I like about this is it's built in, not necessarily bolted on. And so it delivers these integrated native experiences that the end user never even knows that it's there running on the device. And that's what I love about it. And so, we'll get more into that when we get into the demos. Now, I do want to talk about the difference between MDM, mobile device management, and MAM, mobile application management. MDM is around managing the entire operating system of the device. So that's where I literally take my phone, I enroll it into Microsoft Endpoint Manager. You can manage everything about that phone down to the OS. I can push down Wi-Fi profiles, push down a VPN client. I can push down certificates. I can wipe all the data off the device if I wanted to. I can report on what apps are installed on the device. There's a lot of capability there. I can even do what we call device-based conditional access, where, again, if that device has threats on it, maybe we shut it down and we prevent you from accessing different types of data or different types of apps. Whereas on the flip side, and this is more for like corporate liable devices might be issued to an employee from the organization, or it could be a personal device that's being managed, although that might be rare. But mobile application management, I see a lot of this out in the industry right now. And I'm actually really excited about this because with mobile application management, I don't have to manage the device at all. I actually just manage the apps on the device. And so with this, it could be my personal device, but when I log in to a app like Outlook, well, Outlook is being managed by the organization's IT department, so they're pushing down policy to me. They're securing the Outlook app or the Teams app or the OneDrive app or the Zoom app or one of the third-party apps that are supported. They're configuring it, they're securing it, but it's not touching anything else on the device. And I can literally issue a remote wipe command to those apps to only wipe the business data out of those apps, which is obviously a game changer. That's huge. So a lot of capability can be said here around MAM, and it does make me a little bit more flexible than MDM. Now, I can have both if I wanted to. Again, it comes down to my requirements, but you're going to see me do some demos here around MAM, and I just wanted to call out the differences here between MDM and MAM. Okay, so let's jump into the MAM side of things, mobile application management. Now, Microsoft refers to this as APP, an acronym known as App Protection Policies. So when you read the documentation, or you might see in some of my slides here, APP, this is what we're referring to. It's basically MAM. Alphabet soup, I know, right? And so lots of acronyms. But this is where we can sandbox the managed apps from the personal apps on a personal device. And so this is pretty awesome. So this allows me to bring my own device into the workplace. It allows me to separate corporate data from personal data so you can't transfer data between the two. So you might have CUI data or CUI data that is in one app, and you can't take that CUI data and transfer it to another app that's maybe not managed. That's not allowed. And then the app protection policy can also be applicable to third-party apps, not just Microsoft apps. And You might see some out there. I know Citrix has one, Zoom, Box. There's a myriad of them out there. But this is an amazing capability. And when you think about Microsoft Intune, I really want you to think about mobile application management, app protection policies. It is a game changer. You can literally use your own device, your personal device, and have the confidence that that corporate data, that sensitive information is going to be contained in the managed app. And I can send a bunch of commands to that to better secure. And you're going to see in my demos here coming up on that and what that looks like. All right. Let's talk about conditional access for a moment. Now, conditional access is pretty awesome. This is part of Azure Active Directory Premium. Starts in Plan 1 and it goes into Plan 2. And this allows you to define policies at the user level, location level, device level, and even the application level. And this allows me to have controls adapt in real time based on a number of conditions and risks. And then that gets calculated, which then drives an outcome. And so we're looking at a number of conditions over on the left side here. We're looking at who are you? What security groups are you? Are you an administrative user? So on and so forth. Is your device compliant and trusted? Meaning, is it joined to Active Directory or Azure Active Directory hybrid joined? Is it managed by a mobile device manager? Is it compliant? Does it have all of the right policy on the device? And is that policy compliant? Where are you accessing it from? What method or authentication method are you using? What type of app are you using? Many different conditions can come into effect here. And then we will, as you log in, we will analyze that and look at the risk of your session on a low, medium, or high basis, and the risk of your user account on a low, medium, or high basis. And then we calculate that and we give you available controls. Maybe it's block access altogether. Maybe it's allow access. Maybe it's, hey, we'll let you through the front door, but we will block downloads. Force a password reset, which you might be wondering, well, what's secure about that? Well, you actually have to use multi-factor authentication on a device to be able to change your password. So we could do a number of different things. Now, what's happening here in the middle is identity protection, which is part of Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 2. And identity protection does dark web monitoring. So it's actually looking for your credentials in public places. And it's looking to see, are you coming in from an impossible travel scenario? Are you trying to log in from a location you don't normally log in from? Are you coming from a known botnet or a known malicious IP address? Oh, is there malware on your device? That maybe your device is suspicious and has a threat on it. So it's calculating all of this, and that's the power of conditional access. I'm pretty excited about that. Now, when you peel back the onion on this, this is what conditional access looks like underneath the covers. And when I think about CMMC practice area alignment, I'm looking at access control, identification, authentication, and media protection. There's probably others too, but that's what comes to mind for me. And you can see over here that the identity portion of this, powered by Azure Active Directory and Cloud App Security and Defender for Identity, or used to be called Azure ATP. It's powered by Microsoft Intune and Microsoft Endpoint Manager, or Microsoft Defender ATP, or Defender for Endpoint. Also powered by Microsoft Cloud App Security, the CASB, and then all these other different things here. But again, this is a game-changing solution. So let's get to the demos, and you'll be able to see what this looks like. Now, before I jump into the demo, I do want to talk about this notion of multi-identity policies. So this is where we can actually encrypt data using Microsoft Information Protection and control how that data is accessed from devices. So for example, if I send you an email and it has an attachment in that email, and that attachment's been encrypted and labeled by Microsoft Information Protection, but let's say your device is not managed, you can't open the attachment. So that is an example here of being able to control that. We could also look at the risk of your session and the risk of your user account when you go to open that document. And if it fails that at high risk, you can't open it. And we talked about MAM a little bit already, so we'll bypass that and we'll save the rest for the demos. When it comes to threat protection, this is awesome. So Microsoft Defender for Endpoint has capability for iOS and Android that it can actually install an app on there to do various threat monitoring and threat protection. And so if we discover a threat on the device, we can use conditional access to actually block access to corporate resources, and then if you want, even wipe the device, which is pretty cool. So lots of capabilities there. Something else with Microsoft Endpoint Manager that I'm pretty excited about is the company portal app. Now, this is the notion of a few things. It's being able to have almost like a store for your corporate apps on the device. So when I browse it, I can browse just apps that are available to me inside my organization. Maybe it's line of business apps. But I can also go in and see what devices are being managed. I can even wipe my own device from the company portal app. So it's really the user's window into how their device is being managed and how they can get additional apps. So it's pretty awesome. The other thing I like here is that users can enroll or unenroll their devices at any time. You don't have to call IT to enroll it or unenroll it. You do it right through the company portal app. Saves time, saves calls to the help desk. They can add SaaS and public store apps required by the organization directly into company portal, which means they can download it. So if you want to make sure everybody downloads Microsoft Teams, we could actually have it automatically installed or make it available through the company portal app that they can download it themselves, or some kind of a custom line of business app. They can use self-service password resets and PIN resets to reset their credentials. So again, they don't have to call the help desk. And then they can also join other groups and manage their group membership as well. Okay, let's get to the demos. My exciting part here. Let's talk about some examples of using Microsoft Intune across the different practice areas at level 3 of CMMC. So the first one I want to jump into is Terms of Use Agreement. Now, this is pretty amazing. This is where when I go to log into a resource on a device, Windows, Mac, Android, iOS, iPadOS, this will actually force me to accept a Terms of Use Agreement. So here I am trying to add my corporate email to my personal iPad as an example. And when I go to add it here and I click Next, it's going to ask me to sign in. That's pretty standard. So let's go ahead and sign in. And then once I type my credentials, I'm going to be challenged with multi-factor authentication. And there's MFA, so we're going to go ahead and accept that. And then at this point, you will see the Terms of Use Agreement be displayed. Now, Matt Soseman's the name of my organization, but here's the Terms of Use Agreement. I can click Accept or Decline. My policy says you have to expand this before you click Accept, and you have to review it and read it. And then from there, I can click Accept, and it lets me in through the front door. If I click Decline, it gets logged in the audit log, and it won't let me in, obviously. This is amazing. The cool part about this here is when I want to run my little laser pointer over, I can have them accept it on a recurring schedule. So maybe every month, every quarter, every year, twice a year. I can have it happen on every device before they get access to that corporate resource. That's pretty powerful. But also use it before they get access to anything. If you try to log into an app, boom, we're going to ask you to accept the terms of use. Keeps the honest people honest, and it's just like that old Control-Delete screen and that terms of use agreement that you have in Windows. And again, this is supported across basically all device types because it's part of the authentication and it's just part of Azure Active Directory. And obviously that was for access control as one of the practice areas. The next one is PIN. I think this is pretty awesome. So let's say we have a app here that is a work-related app. I can actually log in using a PIN to that app. Let me show you what I mean. So I might launch the Outlook app, which is my company or organization managed app. And when I launch it, my policy says you have to type in a PIN. And so at this point, I'm going to type in a PIN. And I can set that PIN, and my company policy says it has to be 8 digits. So we're going to go ahead and type in that PIN. So bear with me here. The way I'm sharing my screen is you actually won't see me type it in. And then from there, now that I set a PIN, I have a timeout period that's available. So anytime it meets that timeout period, maybe every 5 minutes, maybe every hour, maybe every 1 minute, whatever it may be, the next time I go to access that app, it's going to require me to type in my PIN again in order to gain access. So again, just an easy way here to be able to provide secure access to the managed app. And this is using an app protection policy under that MAM umbrella that we talked about before. All right. A couple notes on this here is that I want to call out that I can also require the user use biometrics. There it is. I'm confirming my PIN. I can also specify the timeout, like I mentioned, force a PIN reset after a certain number of days. If I really wanted to have fun, I can require the full username and password to be typed in whenever they open the app. Wipe the app if you reach a maximum number of PIN attempts. And when I launch the app here, there it goes. It's going to ask me for my PIN again. So this is supported across Microsoft apps and some select third-party apps as well. So again, access control, PIN for access example. Let's jump into requiring multi-factor authentication and mobile device management as an example. So here I am on my personal iPad. I'm going to add my corporate email account to my iPad. And again, this is personal. So we're going to go and tap on Exchange. We're going to type in my credentials. And when I do that, you're going to see it prompt me to log in. And when we log in, conditional access is going to kick in and say, well, your device is not managed. So here we go. So let's get signed in, do the MFA thing. And then look at that. It says, help us keep your device secure. Your sign-in was successful, but your admin requires your device to be managed. So I could click on enroll now. It takes me out to download the company portal app. And then once I download it, then it will allow me access to that corporate data. But this is awesome. If you want access to organization data on your personal device, you got to play by the rules. And the rule here is your device has to be managed. And we want to enforce MFA. So a great example here of access control using Microsoft Intune. I'm pretty excited about this. For me, this is a low-hanging feature and just something that, frankly, I think everybody should have enabled. Block data exfiltration. So this is pretty awesome. Okay, so I've got some different apps installed on my device here. I'm going to launch Outlook. I'm going to type my PIN to gain access to Outlook because it has sensitive data in it. Check it out. We got an email. We have an attachment here that's a sensitive document. When I tap on the share icon, or either when I copy text out of it and I go to paste that text into a non-managed app like the Notes app, boom, it's going to stop me right in my tracks. So paste, organization's data cannot be pasted here. I'm done. I can't exfiltrate that data via clipboard to a non-managed app. So what if I tap on the share icon and choose the next one, like share file via, and I add an account and I add my personal Google Drive? Well, let's try that. So we're going to add my personal Google Drive here. We're going to consent. Look at that. Your organization does not allow you to open any transfer data in this app. So I can't send the data, send the document to something like a third-party cloud storage service. Also, you might have noticed that I don't have access to save it locally either. And there you go, right? The only thing I could do is save it to Outlook. I can't save it anywhere else. Now, I can copy it to Word, but Word is also managed by the organization, which all this policy applies to Word as well. Folks, that's a game changer. I can't exfiltrate this data from that sensitive email to a non-managed app. Now, you might be wondering, well, Matt, what if you take a screenshot? Well, if I'm on an Android device, I actually can block screenshots. On an iOS device, I can't. So I'm going to have to MDM manage the device. And of course, I can't stop you from taking a photo of it here with your phone. So then the question becomes, well, should we be having that sensitive data on the device? And let's dig into that a little deeper. So this is a good example of mobile application management and an app policy to be able to block data exfiltration. Falls under media protection as the practice area here for CMMC. Okay, I'm actually really excited about this one. This is being able to use Microsoft Endpoint Manager and Microsoft Intune to block USB and Bluetooth. So if the device is being managed by Microsoft Endpoint Manager, I can, and it's a Windows device in this case, I can actually block removable storage. I can block USB connections, Bluetooth connections. If I were to scroll up on this page, there's a lot more up here I can do around like like hardware ID and that kind of thing. But this could be useful. What I like about this is this would allow me to use like a USB headset, but it would block a USB thumb drive or USB hard drive. And then obviously I can control Bluetooth connections. So I would consider this under the media protection practice area for CMMC. And again, just an amazing capability. And I can slice and dice this really however I want, as you can see here. App compliance examples. So speaking of access control, this is where I can get a little bit more granular. So if I go to launch one of those apps, like the Outlook app, just as an example, it could be many different apps, but just like the Outlook app here, if you type in the wrong PIN more than 5 times, reset the PIN, or maybe wipe the app. Block access. If I throw my phone in a desk drawer and go on vacation, it's going to block access after so long, or maybe wipe the data out of that app, but leave the rest of the phone and the OS alone. If I disable the user's account in Active Directory, it will wipe the data out of the app. If I specify a minimum application version and you haven't updated the app version, I can block access or do something. I can also say, look, if the device is jailbroken or rooted, block access. What version of operating system is on the device? Will warn them or even block access or wipe the app. Many different things I can do here. This really changes the game to say, look, if you're going to access company data and use the Outlook app or the Teams app or OneDrive or whatever the app is, if you're going to access company data on your personal device or managed device, you got to play by the rules. And the rules are you have to meet this criteria. So that's a pretty amazing capability. Okay, let's get into compliance policies for a moment. This is pretty awesome too. So I would have this fall under configuration management, access control, and identification authentication. It could be a few more too, but for me, this is where it sits. Compliance policy says when the device is managed by Microsoft Endpoint Manager, you have to meet some of these rules. Like it has to be at a minimum OS version. It has to require disk encryption. It has to require different policy, like maybe firewall or other security policy enabled. It has to meet different requirements like, is Microsoft Endpoint Manager installed? Isn't it free of threats? Does it have device integrity enabled and antivirus installed? This is a great way to make sure that those devices are up to speed, they're compliant. And the best part, folks, is that if they don't meet compliance policy, we can actually block their access to that corporate data. And even here, as you can see, we will send them an email letting them know. And then we can also just force a block, like I mentioned. So again, this is a game changer, and I think compliance policies are pretty awesome. And this applies across Mac OS, Android, iOS, and Windows 10. Okay, let's talk about app wipe only business data. And for me, this falls under configuration management. This is pretty amazing. So we're going back to MAM. I'm managing just the app and not the device. So let's say I leave the organization. I can send a remote command from Endpoint Manager that will initiate a remote wipe command for just the app. So here's a case where I launched the Outlook app and it's removing all of my business data from that app, but it's not touching the rest of the device. And in fact, if I had my personal email in Outlook and I had my business email in Outlook together, it would actually wipe only the business data. And it does that through my identity, and it does it through my identity through Azure Active Directory. So this is pretty awesome. Again, it's a game changer, being able to do remote wipe for just the app and not the device. Okay, block data exfiltration. So let's say you're on a Mac or you're on a Windows device and you log in and that device is not managed. And you want to download a document from, say, SharePoint or Teams, or download a document from Box or Dropbox. Well, if I try to download it, it blocks me and stops me in my tracks because the device is not managed. And it's looking at the management status through Microsoft Intune. And if it sees that this device is not managed by Microsoft Intune, it will block you from downloading the file. This is great. Hey, I want to use my personal MacBook to get some work done. I log into the online web app, but when I try to download data to that personal device, it's blocked. Now I can change this and I can say, look, we can apply DLP upon download, block cut, copy, and paste, block uploads. But for me, this is a great media protection example because this scenario does come up a lot. Think about Outlook web app and being able to log into my webmail. But if I want to download an email attachment, it blocks it from downloading because I'm on a personal device. I can also scan the data of that file that it's trying to download. If the file contains CUI data, I could block it. So many different use cases here. All right, kind of save the best for last. I think we have a few more examples, but this is one of my favorites. For me, this falls under configuration management. Automated device provisioning. So check this out. I get the device in my hands as an end user. I turn it on for the first time. I pick my language. I pick my keyboard layout. I connect it to my wireless network, and I log in. Folks, it's as simple as that. And once I log in, all of my, well, I have to authenticate with MFA, but once I authenticate with MFA, all of my apps, all of my data, all of my security policy would be pushed down to the device. I don't need an image. Very, very powerful. Now, the difference between this and using autopilot is really three things. One, autopilot allows you to not grant the user administrative rights to the device. Also, autopilot allows you to preload some of the larger apps onto the device. We call that white glove. And then there's a few other things. But this is a great example, especially during the pandemic here. I've talked to a lot of organizations that send people home. They don't have a way of installing an image. They don't have a way of managing that device. So they will tell them, hey, go buy a device, or let me ship one to you from an OEM. As long as it has Windows 10 Professional or Enterprise and you're using Microsoft Intune, you could do this. Very amazing capability. In fact, here at Microsoft, this is what I use every day. When I got my last device from the company, I turn it on, plug in a few parameters here like the wireless network, I log in, and it starts to load in all my apps, all my data, all the security policy. I'm off to the races. Great, great example. Now, there's a lot more to this, obviously, but this uses the same technology as Windows Update called delivery optimization, meaning it's not going to flood the network by pulling all this stuff down. In fact, the first computer on the network that pulls it down wins, and then all the child computers then pull off of that master or that parent. So there's a whole architecture there that we can go through, and it's in the documentation. Automated device provisioning, pretty awesome. And again, you could use Google Android Enterprise for Android devices, and you could also use Apple Business Manager for iOS and iPadOS devices to get the same effect. And there's my device. It's up and running, and it's ready to go. Okay, I mentioned before you could block screenshots using Microsoft Endpoint Manager on Android. So if my Android device is not managed, or maybe it's managed, and I go to take a screenshot through that MAM policy, I could block it, and this is what it would look like here. Now, this is not available in a MAM policy on iOS and iPadOS, and that's I think that's a limitation of the SDK that Apple makes available. So on an iOS device, I would have to enroll it into my MDM, into Endpoint Manager, to then block screenshots. But for personal Android devices, I can block the screenshot. This is great. In fact, if you go to multitask and you swipe up, it will actually blur out the screen. When I went to go take the screenshot, you could see that it blurred out the screen here as well. Amazing capability. Again, it's those basic things that sometimes we don't consider. The other basic thing that we don't consider is baselines. So if I have a Windows 10 device that is managed by Microsoft Endpoint Manager, by Intune, I can deploy these baselines. Check out all of this policy here in this video. I can deploy all of this policy to those devices as a baseline. This basically answers the question, if Microsoft were to recommend a security baseline, what would they recommend? It's this. No excuse not to use this, in my opinion. And the reporting is pretty robust. I can see which devices deviate from the baseline. I can see who's missing the baseline. But this is going through a ton of security policy. And we have this for Windows 10, Defender for Endpoint, and Microsoft Edge. So this, for me, is under the configuration management practice. And again, I think it's an amazing capability, really low-hanging fruit. Disk encryption. So for Windows 10, and we could do this with Mac OS too, with like File Vault, and even mobile devices, we could do this. But I want to talk about Windows 10. We can use BitLocker to encrypt the disk, and using Microsoft Endpoint Manager and Intune, push that down remotely to the device. And for me, this falls under configuration management and media protection and practice areas. And so here you can see as I scroll through it, all the different parameters I can configure for BitLocker. Now there's something here that I want to point out, and you'll see in just a second. I can actually view those keys centrally. So this will centrally store those recovery keys for BitLocker. I don't have to go deploy MBAM or do anything else complex. It's just automatically uploaded to Azure Active Directory and it gets stored there, and Microsoft Endpoint Manager can then view it. So being able to remotely enable disk encryption is huge. All right, let's start to wrap up here a little bit. Resources. Before I go there, though, I hope you found some value in this. We're about 40 minutes in, and as you can see, I'm just getting started. There's so much more to talk about. So please let Summit 7 know if you want to go deeper on some of this. And by all means, ask questions, and we'll get those answered for you. Okay, so Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Just to recap, this is a combination of Configuration Manager and Intune, really in one product, single pane of glass, if you will. Cloud powered on the back end. It's great because it's great for corporate issued devices, but also bring your own device. And the reason why I like this a lot is it does have a lot of value. If I want to manage servers, well, Intune doesn't necessarily manage servers, but that's where I use Configuration Manager. But through Microsoft Endpoint Manager, I have a centralized way to manage it. So that is very robust and very flexible. So a little bit there about Microsoft Endpoint Manager. The other thing I want to mention is all the different resources out there. So check out the solution website, AKMS Endpoint Manager. Please check out the ebook on Zero Trust. Check out the how-to documentation, walks you through everything with Microsoft Endpoint Manager and Intune. Get into co-management a little bit and how that interacts when you have Configuration Manager and you have Microsoft Intune and through Endpoint Manager. That documentation will go through that. And then Zero Trust device management as well. So awesome capability here, folks. I can't thank you enough for investing your time with me here today. So let's pivot and let's jump into Q&A, and I'll be around for a little bit here and we will answer your questions. And if there's anything specific that I touched on you want to talk about, let me know. If there's something I didn't touch on, hey, let me know as well, and we'll talk about it.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. That was great. Tons and tons of questions, a lot of them technical by nature, some of them also compliance in nature. I'm going to try to answer some of the more compliance heavy ones, and I'll kind of give you some of the more roadmap things. It's one of those, I know at least amongst your team, it can be a challenge for obviously our clients. It can be challenging even just internally to Microsoft to kind of keep up and capture all of the updates as they're rolling out. And as there's just disparate teams and different resources, it's hard to kind of capture all that. So I appreciate you coming on board and giving some of those updates and clarifying when things are going to be launched as much as you can, obviously, because we obviously want to make sure that we're giving people the most accurate information that we can and not overshooting anything. And so with that, just kind of want to talk about some of the questions about features and things of that nature. Let's see. The first one was compliance manager. Let's talk about that. You talked about that kind of at the very beginning. A question was asked about the CMMC template for compliance manager in commercial. Is that available today, or when will it be available?
That is available today in commercial. If you just go to compliance.microsoft.com, click on the assessment tab at the top, doing this from memory here, we click on assessments, and then you'll have a section for premium assessment templates. It's available, levels 1 through 5 is a premium assessment template. So
That's
is
great.
available. And there's some great documentation out there that covers that as well.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, on that note, I will say another thing that I would encourage everybody to look at is on the public sector tech community. There was recently a blog around Compliance Manager and its release within GCC and GCC High, as well as it can give a little bit of information on how to use that template. And also to the Placemat is also covered quite a bit on that specific blog. So if you want to check out that's another great resource for everybody to look at. Let's see here. The GCC High roadmap does not mention conditional access custom controls. Have you heard if Microsoft is working on custom controls so we can integrate Duo MFA, for example?
That's a great question. I don't have an answer for that. That might be something I'm going to need to follow up on. Generally speaking, when it comes to GCC High and even the DoD cloud, because of the environment they have to work in, it's always going to be a little behind from commercial, but they're trying really hard to bring it up to parity. Mm-hmm. So if it's not in there today, chances are they are working on it, but that might be somewhere to follow up on. I don't have any information on that.
Totally fine. Totally fine. And we'll try to follow up with some of these that are a little bit more nuanced. If we can, we'll try to follow up with those in email. Another one kind of in a similar vein is, when is Microsoft going to allow installing and removing apps through the company portal that you mentioned previously, but on GCC High? Do you have any indication on that one?
As we've been talking here, I looked up the service description. I don't see any limitation there, but again, I could be wrong. When you go to publish an app and the device is MDM managed via Intune, if you set it as required, it will actually be installed, and when they unenroll the device, it will uninstall the app. If you set it to, I think, uninstall, then it will, or remove, the terminology there might be different, but and it finds the app on the device, will actually uninstall it. But if you're seeing some issues there in GCC High, let us know. We can work through that. I don't have anything specific on that though,
Okay, that's great.
unless somebody else out there has encountered that.
Okay, yeah, wonderful. Is it possible to trigger a device or app wipe based on detected GPS location? So, i.e., I guess someone is traveling to a suspect country, for instance, and you immediately
Mhm.
want to wipe all
Yeah,
content. For instance, I'm assuming that's the use case here. Is that
yeah.
a possibility?
It is a possibility. So there's a couple solutions for that. And this is where I'm thinking we probably want to do an Ask Me Anything and go deeper into this, because these are some really good
Yeah, yeah,
questions.
there's quite a bit.
But yeah, two things come to mind. You can create a compliance policy, which you can have it trigger GPS coordinates. And then if you are using Apple Business Manager or Android Enterprise, that's got some GPS capability as well. And then there's some other things we could do just natively in Intune. So the answer is yes. It may not be the approach that you're thinking of, but there's always going to be a solution for that.
There's a way if
There's
there's
a
a
way.
will.
Yep.
Similar scenario based thing, and I think your answer is going to be yes too. Can Intune be used to require MFA every time a user logs into a computer or a device? And I think you talked about that in one of your demos.
Yeah, so this is a great one, and maybe we need to talk about Windows Hello for Business at some point.
Ooh, yeah.
But regardless if I'm in government or commercial, if I'm using a Windows 10 professional machine or enterprise and I enroll in Windows Hello for Business, by default, that's multi-factor authentication. So I'm using a PIN or facial recognition or fingerprint. That's something I have, and then something I know is a digital certificate that's actually in the TPM chip of that computer, and that's something I know. And so combined together, that's MFA when I log in.
Mhm.
So that's for Windows. I can enable similar type of MFA functionality for Mac OS. And then Android and iOS, obviously that's going to be a passcode or Touch ID or Face ID or something like that. And that's all driven through a compliance policy. So I can enable a compliance policy that says you have to enroll in those biometrics regardless of the device to be able to use it. So
Mhm.
that's a way to enforce MFA. And then one step further, when you go to launch one of those apps, like I mentioned the Outlook app in the demo, I can then also have a PIN prompt you. So that's another way to kind of look at it as well.
I like that. This is another good one. Can you have, so you have a single device, let's say, and it's a company that for whatever reason they have a GCC high tenant for their DoD contracting portion of their business, and then they may still retain their commercial tenant, and they both have Intune policies, but that device for that singular user may need to access both tenants in both environments, and thus may need to be enrolled in possibly two Intune policies. How does that work? How does that function? Pros, cons, or not deficiencies, but issues they may face, and maybe if it's just some general guidance on that scenario as it pertains to Intune policies and enrollment.
Yeah, you can be enrolled in MDM and you can have an app managed by MAM at the same time. MAM works based on your identity, and so it actually uses Azure Active Directory to look at your identity, and that's how it figures out and knows, okay, is this a personal email account or is it a business email account?
Hmm.
So if I'm enrolled in MDM, maybe in a commercial tenant, but then I'm using Office 365 GCC High on the Outlook app to access that email. I could theoretically, and from a technical perspective, have that running side by side, right? Device is managed by commercial, the app is managed by GCC High. So technically speaking, that's possible. Does that raise any compliance flags? That's probably something we want to gain clarity on. But from a technical perspective, yeah, why not?
Yeah. Yeah. Things get a lot cleaner. Obviously, if you can have a single environment and a single tenant for your organization, We run into different scenarios though, just depending upon the organization and how large of a footprint their DoD contracting portion of their business, that business unit maybe, it kind of varies as far as size. So it depends on what the organization ultimately decides to do in terms of different environments. Speaking of CMMC, one of the questions that was asked is, can you do a BYOD scenario and still maintain compliance with CMMC level 3? The answer is you can basically configure your Intune policies and all of the conditional access policies and things that Matt mentioned in your GCC High tenant to be compliant with CMMC. And obviously, there's a lot of asterisks there, in a sense that how you configure that is not a guaranteed whether or not you're going to go into your assessment and pass with flying colors. There are 1,000 ways to configure an Intune policy. And so it just depends on how you do so. But essentially you can do that to where if those devices that are BYOD are enrolled in those policies and thus those security measures are implemented on that device, you can meet the CMMC requirements pertaining to that access. So let's see here. Matt, is there any specific ones that really caught your attention that you want to address too?
Yeah, just a few here, and then we can start to wrap up. And we can talk later about doing an Ask Community things. There's some really great questions, but there are some points around autopilot. Referencing the master service description, I don't see autopilot being listed as supported yet. I saw some folks mentioning that they believe it might be. So that's something I need to go double check on. It's possible that the service description hasn't been updated yet. I saw some questions around group policy. Can Intune manage group policy? No, it cannot. However, there is a ton of group policy that Microsoft brought into Intune, and we call that configuration profiles. And so there's a whole lengthier discussion behind that. But yes, you can manage a device using policy and maybe not even have to have GPO. And there's a lot more to that. Another one I saw was around admin rights. So if I enroll a Windows 10 device, how do I remove local admin rights? If I'm using autopilot, that will actually remove local admin rights. Otherwise, when you enroll the device, by default, it gives you local admin rights, and that's by design because that's how it manages the device. I can remove it later, although there are some asterisks there. But when you go and you look at Zero Trust and you look at how that really works, nowadays it's actually debatable whether or not local admin rights really causes a risk. And that's a whole other conversation, but I thought I'd bring that up. I'm walking through the questions here. There was a great one here around, does Office 365 have a built-in tool to help manage baseline configurations? So I showed one of the demos there around baseline configuration for Windows 10. And you saw where basically if Microsoft said, here's how we recommend you applying a security baseline to Windows 10, this would be the policy. And I showed you how to manage that. There's another policy just for the Office apps, or what we call now the Microsoft 365 Enterprise apps, so Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Mm-hmm. That's available at config.office.com. And there's several thousand policies you could apply to the Office apps directly. And that has its own baseline. So that would be something I would encourage you to check out. Scrolling through the list here. Here's a great one. Any suggestions for convincing staff that incorporating an endpoint protection agent in Intune is a good thing?
That's a good one.
That's a great one. And so just a couple of things. Intune doesn't use an agent on Windows 10. Windows 7 it does, and Endpoint 1 it does. But on Windows 10, no agent. But if you deploy Microsoft Defender for Endpoint on Windows 10, there's no agent there as well. It's actually agentless. And so that's how I would answer that question. But I would look at it more around the capability and the business value that you're getting out of it. Absolutely a good thing, right? If we can be able to secure that device, monitor compliance, and then also be able to make sure it's free of threats, there's a lot of value there. So definitely something that, and maybe Sean, you and the team can help build a business case around with that organization. But I thought that was a great one that we can definitely dive into later.
Yeah, there's several pieces to that too. Even just the fact that in many cases you're already paying for it.
Yep.
At least I know a lot of not a lot of companies, they by default are enabling E3s or EMS E3s for all of their users. In many cases, it just kind of comes with it, and so you're getting a lot of added security that you're already paying for in many cases. And really, you talked about it with specifically how you can wipe devices, specifically the non-Big Brother scenario. We're only going to be protecting the information that really matters to the organization on that mobile device. There's not going to be a lot of overreach for users.
Yeah. There's another great question here. If someone uses Outlook for personal accounts, will you prevent them from copying and pasting their own personal emails, or is the policy app-wide? Great question. It is, as I mentioned before, it's aware of your identity through Azure Active Directory. So if I'm logged into my Gmail account, that's personal, and I'm also logged into my Office 365 account, and that's using Azure AD, and it's on the same app, it's an Outlook, the policy is smart enough to only apply those restrictions like copy and paste to just the identity for Azure AD, so just the Office 365 email. So, and that's what I love about MAM, right? So it's very flexible for those BYOD scenarios or people that want to use personal data on that device, and it's aware of that through identity. So, yes, that is possible. Scrolling through the list, gosh, so many great questions. I think probably the thing I want to leave everybody with is probably two things here. The one I want to leave you with is, I mentioned this in the presentation, have an open mind, because some of the stuff that I showed you, and there's a lot more, it does challenge the status quo with IT, right? And the traditional approaches. And there's a modern way of being able to do it that makes it a really nice experience for the user. And frankly, as an IT pro, it saves me a lot of headache and a lot of time. But it does require that paradigm shift. And then the second thing that I would encourage you to think about is test some of these scenarios out. Go out and lab it up. All of those videos that I had pre-recorded there in that slide deck,
Yeah, that's great.
because there's a lot of pre-recorded demos in there and those iPad screenshots. All of that is just being done with just a standard Intune tenant. So you can do the same thing. So I just encourage you to go out there, read the documentation, watch more videos, get more informed, but a lot of interesting capability with this product. And it could probably really help you out, not just with CMMC, but meeting other requirements as well. So I'll kind of leave it at that, but Sean, anything you want to close this out with?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think you've covered pretty much everything. I definitely think we need to do some sort of AMA pertaining to just Intune and possibly even rolling in some things around conditional access. And there's just, it's very far reaching. This product has a lot of legs to it in terms of what it touches and how it involves other products. So I think the amount of question, the magnitude, I think warrants definitely some sort of further conversation. So thank you, Matt. We look forward to having some further conversations, and we will get this video published as soon as we can somewhere on our YouTube channel, which if you haven't subscribed already, it's at cmmc.video. You can find that YouTube channel. Subscribe to that. Also, too, check out Matt's. If you look up, Matt, if you want to plug your specific URL, what's probably the best way for people to find your YouTube channel?
Just youtube.com/Matt Soseman, and I'll put it here in the chat window for everybody.
That's perfect. Yeah. You talk about the kind of follow-up and exploring different feature sets. Matt has a plethora of videos out there kind of unpacking different nuanced scenarios, different features, et cetera, within Intune, and then as well as many, many, many other products. So highly recommend that. And thanks again, Matt. I really do appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for investing your time with me.